Welcome to the franchise. I'm Charean Williams, and this is Rick Gosselin. We are DFW's only Hall of Fame voters, and today we're going to talk about the receiver position. Dez Bryant is gone from the Cowboys, as is Jason Witten, now retired. So Dak Prescott says the Cowboys don't need a number one receiver. They can do without one. The Philadelphia Eagles went out and got Alshon Jeffrey before last season, but they didn't have a 1,000-yard receiver and won the Super Bowl. Goose, the history of football, does it tell us that we don't need a number one receiver? Is Dak right?
No, Dak's right, and so is history.
Yeah.
You look at, I think the Cowboys were spoiled. When they won Super Bowls, they had Bob Hayes, Drew Pearson, Michael Irvin. These guys are Ring of Honor, Hall of Fame caliber receivers. They were go-to guys. When in doubt, you throw them the ball. But you look at the top 5 receivers of all time. Jerry Rice, he was part of a dynasty in San Francisco. He's the only one of the top 5 that won a Super Bowl. Randy Moss, no Super Bowl. Terrell Owens, no Super Bowl. Larry Fitzgerald, no Super Bowl. Tony Gonzalez never even got there. You know, it's great to have the volume and go to Pro Bowls, but you need somebody who can contribute to the winning cause. Only 4 times, since 2000 there have been 18 Super Bowl champions. Only 4 times did the champion have a Pro Bowl wide receiver, and 2 of them were tight ends. The only 2 were Greg Jennings in 2010 with the Packers and Marvin Harris in 2006 with the Colts. You don't need that guy. You look at the Eagles last year. Their leading receiver was Zach Ertz. He finished 18th in the NFL in receiving, 30th in yards. The game has changed. You know, once upon a time, you'd throw the ball to Michael Irvin, to Dez Bryant 10, 12 times a game. But now, with all the 4 and 5 receiver sets, you're spreading the ball around. There are more catches, more chances for other receivers.
The thing's kind of changed for Jerry Jones, too. Not only has the game changed, but I think Jerry Jones' philosophy maybe has changed a little bit, too, because you go back, you think about the Joey Galloway trade, when he traded the 2 first-round picks for Joey and went out and signed T.O., and he's always wanted that big receiver because he had it with Michael Irvin. But as you said, you don't need that guy, and I think Jerry has kind of figured that out. We're into this analytics thing, and I think analytics has told them, not necessarily Jerry making this decision, but analytics has told them you don't need to spend all that money on a top receiver. And now they aren't. They've let Dez go. They've released him, and they're going with this receiver by committee approach. They're going to use 5 guys and probably a bunch of tight ends too.
Yeah, you don't want to soak that much money into that position. Yeah. You know, they got burned with Roy Williams, with Joey Galloway, with Dez Bryant. You look at the cornerstone pieces to a championship: quarterback, left tackle, edge rusher, cover corner, and then downfield threat. And that downfield threat, the receiver, is the least of those 5. You can win without that guy. When the Ravens won in 2000, their leading receiver was a tight end, Shannon Sharp, who had like 67 catches. You don't need a receiver to go to the Pro Bowl and win a receiving title to win a Super Bowl. And I think Jerry has to realize that, because he has been burned 2 and 3 times in the past by giving so much cap dollars to players that didn't win him championships.
And think about how many draft picks, too, they burned on receivers, number one receivers, and it didn't necessarily all work out. You know, Dez has not had a 1,000-yard season since 2014, hasn't had a 100-yard game in 23 games, and I don't think that's what Dak likes to do, but we're going to talk more about that in our next segment coming up, about the Cowboys and the future of the receiver position.
Yeah, and I think what you're going to see is a different type of passing attack. You know, they always had the ball. They could throw the jump ball to Dez downfield. I think it's going to be a much shorter passing attack, quicker passes, get the ball in the hands of receivers, much like New England. Tom Brady has never had a great arm, but he gets the ball out quickly to his receivers, to Gronkowski, to Edelman, and let them do something with the ball after the catch. And I think that's what's going to happen. The Cowboys are going to become a short passing offense.
And Brady's probably a good example of that. You look at the receivers he's had over history. Randy Moss is the one guy that stands out, and yes, Moss was at the end of his career, but had a great year with Tom Brady that one year. But he hasn't had great receivers. I mean, none of those guys we're going to be considering for the Hall of Fame. Julian Edelman and Wes Welkers and the Danny Amendolas, all those guys. None of those guys are going to the Hall of Fame. He hasn't had that true number one receiver outside of Randy Moss the couple of years he had him.
And when he had Moss, he didn't win a Super Bowl.
Right, that's right.
He's won 5 Super Bowls, and not one time in those 5 championships did they have a receiver voted to the Pro Bowl. He's won with Deion Branch and Troy Brown and Julian Edelman. He's made the receivers better, and that's what the Cowboys are going to have from Prescott. You're going to have the quarterback make the receivers better. Last 2 years, I think you asked the receivers to make Prescott better. Now it's flipped. It's going to be on deck.
Coming up, we're going to go out to the Star for some interviews on the receiver position. Sanjay, what do you think of your receivers so far, getting to work with them in the off-season program?
It's been a pleasure. They're hardworking, really dedicated. They take coaching, and they're hungry, so it's been nice.
Do you need one of these guys to step forward and become the lead receiver?
The way you coach, you want all of them to take a jump and then let it sort itself out. We don't say, well, someone has to be the lead dog. If you've got 5 guys that play with juice, run good routes, block, that's good enough. That's more than good enough.
You used a third-round pick on Michael Gallup. What did you like about him on film, and how long do you foresee him taking to do what he needs to do in the league, considering that he did play at a smaller type school, not a smaller big school? Yes.
I don't link it to smaller big school. I think it's just, well, first he has the skill set to win versus tight man-to-man coverage. So we saw that. He's physical, he's got some juice, and he can catch. Time, I don't like to put time on it. We're going to accelerate him as fast as he feels comfortable while pushing him along the way. So as all great athletes do, they ascend. So we'll just see how it goes.
What's the biggest adjustment he's going to have? Is it the speed of the game? Is it physicality of the game? Jumping from Colorado State to the NFL, what's the biggest?
It's consistency of competition. So he's always going to face a really good corner, and the catch windows are smaller. So maybe he had to strain on 2 or 3 routes a game to win. Well, in the NFL, you're straining on every route. So to play at that consistent play strength, play tempo, that's an adjustment for guys.
Do you think he's figured that out yet, the smaller windows? Because I remember I was talking to Jim Fossil back when he hit the Giants, and Jeremy Shockey was the first-round pick, came up and said, Coach, I can't get open. And Fossil says, no, you're open. You're not going to be open like this. Right. This is open in this league. Do you think Gallup has figured out that the window's smaller?
I think he sees the windows are smaller, and I think he feels like when he has to climb on contact, he has to strain a lot harder to get that 6 inches. And now it's not a foot, it's 6 inches here. So every day he's seeing more and more of that.
Deontay Thompson was with you in Buffalo, and you really liked him, and I know you wanted him here. What is it about him that you feel like he'll excel in this offense?
He's professional. He knows what it takes to win on game day. He's fast, and he can run routes. He got released by Chicago last year. Buffalo picked him up instantly, and he had a 100-yard game in 4 days of work. That kind of sums up what kind of guy he is.
How much better will Dak make this receiving group?
I think it's synergy of everyone. The better the receivers are, the better Dak looks, the better Dak plays, the better receivers look. So I see it as an offense as a whole, that everyone being on the same page, being detailed, I think the whole offense will raise up.
Welcome back. For the first time in a long time, Rick, the Cowboys are not going to have Dez Bryant as their #1 receiver. Produced 3,000-yard seasons. Now you project the Cowboys' top 5 receivers, they have 1,000-yard season among them. That's Allen Hurns. And Dez actually has more touchdowns in his career than those 5 have in their careers together, and his numbers are pretty close to what those guys have. Let's talk about the Cowboys specifically and how they adjust for not having Dez Bryant and what they need to do really at the receiver position, but also factor in the tight end position where now Jason Witten is retired, and we don't even know who the #1 tight end is going to be.
Right, and there's going to be a major adjustment period, and it may take this team well into the season to figure it out. You know, when you lose Dak or Dez and Jason, you're losing 43% of Dak's completions, 42% of his yards, and half of his touchdown passes. Now, where are they going to get that slack picked up? Is it Terrence Williams, who caught 53 passes and no touchdowns last year? Can you trust him on or off the field? Allen Hurns, you said he had a 1,000-yard season, but last year he had, 43 catches, 11 games, no 100-yard games, 2 touchdowns. Now, that's not exactly a lead receiver. You know what you've got in Beasley, and if you get down by the goal line, he'll be dynamite. We don't know who's going to be a tight end. The key, I think, is going to be the 3rd-round pick, Michael Gallup.
The Cowboys really believe that Sanjay Law, their new receivers coach, is the top receivers coach in football. He's replaced Derek Dooley, and they think he's going to make a big difference. He brought in Deontay Thompson, too. He really likes him, worked with him in Buffalo, but they think the receivers coach is going to make a big difference. How much difference can a receivers coach make with these guys? Can he make this group of receivers that much better?
Yeah, without question. I think one of the best receiver coaches I've seen was Richard Williamson, who was at Carolina. And Richard accelerated the development of both Muhsin Muhammad and Steve Smith. I mean, these guys were lower draft, mid-round draft picks, and they became Pro Bowl receivers. Muhammad led the league in receiving one year. This was all about coaching, and that's what they're going to need here. This is a fairly young and a fairly inexperienced receiver group. You know, Noah Brown, he needs to be developed. Gallup needs to be developed. You know, Gallup was at Colorado State with all the gaudy numbers he put up, and he had a couple 200-yard games against Hawaii and Nevada. He's not going to be facing Hawaii and Nevada on this schedule. In college, defensive backs play off and show receivers respect. They show no respect in the NFL. They're going to be in your grill at the line of scrimmage, and you're going to have to beat coverage, run your route, catch the ball. So there's going to be a major adjustment period for Gallup.
And we know how much rookie receivers struggle. You can go back and look at the first rounders from last year and how much they struggled. It's just an adjustment period. And this kid didn't play at a Power 5 school, as you said, even though he was a Biletnikoff Award finalist. He still is going to have a bigger adjustment having not played in that Power 5 conference.
Yeah, you look at the receivers that came in as rookies and had success. Michael Thomas 2 years ago, 1,000-yard season. He's from Ohio State. Odell Beckham came in, rookie, 1,000-yard season. He's from LSU. Amari Cooper, 1,000-yard season. He's from Alabama. These players have been playing the top flight competition in college, so it was a smaller step for them to take. The last receiver that the Cowboys can really liken Gallup to is Marcus Colston. He was a 7th-round pick in 2006 out of Hofstra. He had a 1,000-yard season as a rookie, but he had Drew Brees throwing the football. Big difference between Drew Brees right now and Dak Prescott.
No question about that. Let's talk about the tight end position, because Jason Witten hit them a little bit late with this retirement. You know, it had been a couple weeks of voluntary workouts, and then he decides that he's going to retire. It's left them with a group of tight ends who are not exactly household names. Jeff Swaim right now is penciled in the starter. I think Rico Gathers probably has the most upside. Obviously, haven't played basketball at Baylor, and then Dalton Schultz they drafted. Blake Jarwin is coming back, played one game, I think, last year. They don't have a good group of tight ends. What do you expect from this group of tight ends from the Cowboys, and what do they need to do?
Well, I think the position is going to be de-emphasized. You know, in the last several years, last 15 years, they would flank Witten. They'd slide him out and put him in a slot. I don't think you're going to see that. I think you're going to see more 4 receiver sets. Instead of Witten on a flank, it's going to be Noah Brown or Michael Gallup, and they're going to have 4 wide receivers that the defense has to cover. I think that tight end is going to be, unless Gathers really accelerates the development, he can be a red zone guy, but I think by and large the tight end is going to be a blocking position in this offense. They didn't have Witten stay home and block much. I think they'll have the tight end block a little bit more than the past.
I'm excited to see Rico Gathers and what he can do. He's now been 2 years on this team. The first year he spent on the practice squad. Last year he looked really good for 2 games in the preseason, then got hit with a concussion in practice and didn't play again and was on injured reserve for the year. But he's had 2 years now to learn this offense. I'll be excited to see what he can do going forward, and I think this is a big offseason and a big preseason for him to see if he can develop into what they thought he might develop into, and what we've seen in the NFL in the past with basketball players turning into tight ends.
I think he'll be one of the featured players in the preseason.
Yeah.
They've got to find out what he brings to the table. You look at the history of basketball players, the Antonio Gates and Tony Gonzalez. I mean, these guys are mismatches for defenses because of the basketball athletic ability. They've gone up and got rebounds. You know, they know how to muscle players off the ball. And if Gathers can take that next step, I think he's your X factor in the passing game.
Thank you for joining us today on another segment of The Franchise. We'll see you again soon.